30,000 pilots from the nation's largest airlines rejecting contracts this week. Negotiations derailed by the pandemic, now growing tense as the industry contends with a pilot shortage amid escalating costs. For more, we want to bring in Captain Dennis Tajer, Allied Pilots Association Spokesperson. This union represents 15,000 American Airlines pilots. Dennis, it's great to have you. So let's start with American Airlines there, since you are representing the 15,000 pilots of that carrier. Voted against the tentative agreement this week. Why?
Well, our leadership actually took what was in place and reviewed it and said it didn't get anywhere near meeting what our membership expect for a contract. And it's not just about the money. There's a market rate for pilots. It's gone up dramatically. Inflation has cut away at our purchasing power. We watch Alaska, a national carrier, versus us as a global carrier, just settle a deal. And importantly, they went up 20+% on their pay rates. But the number one issue for our pilots is work-life balance and scheduling practices. And the Alaska pilots work with their management team to execute a deal that will not only take care of that need for the pilots, but actually frees them up to do even more flying and keeps the schedule more reliable. On this program, on a financial side, when an airline cancels flights, it affects the unit cost because it's less ASM available seat miles out there. Right now, American, by having all these canceled flights, is actually increasing their costs, and they haven't even gotten the value out of it if they had actually invested in a pilot contract. So we're going to get this done, but it's not going to be done on the cheap. It's not going to be done with a low-level investment because the revenue opportunity out there is unlike anything we've ever seen. Just listen to the quarterly calls. Every CEO is saying record revenue and passenger demand like they've never seen before, even in these so-called shoulder months.
So then how many of these issues were already brewing before COVID really put a lot more pressure on pilots and airline workers as well versus some of the more specific things that are now coming out?
It's a great question. Some of these issues were fissure cracks within the foundation of operation through management's inattention to that. But the pandemic, when they did not keep pilots trained, they retired airplanes early and didn't retrain pilots for that. Furloughed pilots had early retirements. I think I might have mentioned that. Bottom line was they had this wave of pilot training that they never did, which was part of the $54 billion investment promise. That part they're still catching up from. So what they've done is they saw the revenue coming in, the demand. They didn't expect it to come back till 2024. Well, they were an outlier because we saw it coming along with many analysts. So what happened is now they just dumped in ticket sales. Even Delta admitted they just went for the revenue and they overplayed it. So now they have a system that is not trusted, that has been pushed to the edge. And the things that they did to try and keep it rolling, they continue to try and do that. They schedule us to the maximum with very little buffer and we go illegal, flight cancels, or they push us to the point of exhaustion where by FAA law, we cannot fly when we're fatigued and we have to make the right call for safety and actually fatigue off of a flight. These are all undermining the reliability and the revenue stream, not to mention the brand damage. And it's also pushing on the margin of safety. We're going to defend that margin of safety, so no passenger has to worry about that. But we're human, and the first thing that goes when you're fatigued is your judgment. It's a vicious cycle, and it's got to be stopped. And some of the answers are in our contract. I can guarantee you that working with us is going to be a lot less expensive than if you work against us, because there's revenue to go get out there, and we want to help you harvest that.
Well, Dennis, she said it's not just about the money. In the latest tentative agreement, it did call for 12% raises for pilots on the date of the contract signing, plus 5% after 1 year, 2% after 2 years. Were you satisfied with that part of it, or do you want a bigger pay increase?
Well, that did not satisfy it at all. Number one, we've got inflation. What would satisfy you? Yeah, what would satisfy us is actually recognizing that the regional affiliates, the smaller airplanes, they got pay raises up into the 80% range. Now, that's not what we're looking for. We know they were deeply behind. You can get paid more working for a regional affiliate, the smaller airplanes, than you can for mainline. It's upside down. We're going to fix that. The other side of this is that every contract is up for negotiations now. Sans Alaska, who settled, you're not going to be left behind. Dear management team, you're not going to be the outlier. And I got news for you. We will have snap-ups because we're all negotiating in this narrow band of time. If someone gets a little bit higher pay rate, you're not going to be an outlier by providing that, because we are going to have a snap up that brings us there. It's becoming the industry standard, and all this, the convergence of the pandemic, the recovery, and these contract negotiations make it a very safe and compelling time to negotiate modern deals with pilots. It's going to be a commoditized, not only on a pay rate basis, but actual utilization rate. It's all right here, and it's actually going to be good for the industry. We just have to get management to join us so that we can point all of our energy toward making a better product, putting more flights out there, which will actually help ease the unit cost, the more ASMs you have out there. We get this business, and we want to be a part of it in a functional way, but we will not be exploited while management tries to figure out how to modernize their operation.
We'll certainly be keeping track of how talks are progressing. A big thank you, Allied Pilots Association spokesperson, Captain Dennis Tajer. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.